Unbounce listener from ListenLayer is the most powerful way to track activity across your Unbounce landing pages and forms. Once the listener is turned on, we're going to want to navigate to the features screen and turn on our form activity features that we want to use. Now, each of these individual features is going to push information into the data layer when activity occurs on your Unbounce forms. You can see examples of the code that's pushed into the data layer for each of them here. In addition, there's an event settings screen that identifies each of the events and will contain other features or other settings for those events as they are enabled. So within our overall activity, we're able to track form submissions automatically across all Unbounce pages by simply pushing events and variables into the data layer. We can track when forms actually load, and we can also track when a form submission fails due to a validation error. So let's take a look at these, and then we'll come back and look at our other features inside of ListenLayer. So here we are on the Google Tag Manager debug view, and we can see we're looking at an Unbounce form or an Unbounce page with a form on it. I'll just do a refresh to make sure I'm connected here. And what we can see is an event has been pushed into our data layer called UB form loaded. Now, remember, this is coming from the form loads feature. And this includes information from the form itself collected in this form fields section, as well as specific Unbounce values. So you can identify the actual page ID, which will match to the identifier that's found when you're editing the page inside of Unbounce itself. You can actually see the variant A. You can see whether this variant is currently used as the main variant in your Unbounce testing or not as the main variant, as the actual challenger, the name, and the URL itself. All of this information is easily seen here in the Google Tag Manager debug view. This is the push that occurred inside of the data layer. And here's Google Tag Manager's latest version of what they've read in the data layer. Because you can see this in Tag Manager, it's available to write rules to trigger tags based on events and variables, as well as to capture those variables specifically inside of Tag Manager. So let's say you have a couple Unbounce landing pages, but your plan is to scale that up and end up with 35 different pages, all with different variants. Tracking across multiple marketing platforms like Google Ads, Facebook Ads, Google Analytics, LinkedIn Ads, Microsoft Ads. We want to capture all this accurately, and that can be quite a difficult thing to do without something like ListenLayer that will automate that tracking. Now, in addition to seeing that information there, inside the debug view, we get objects here that are pushed into the data layer, and they're also surfaced easily in the console so you can see what information is being pushed into that data layer. So you don't necessarily have to have the Tag Manager debug view on to see what's going on your pages. So let's attempt to submit this form, and we'll see that we get a form validation error because we have a required field. And we got a new object here called UB form validation failed. That's been read by Google Tag Manager. And again, we can write some simple rules to do some really powerful things with that. And finally, we'll actually go ahead and submit our form here with just some test information. And we'll see we get the UB form submitted. Now, in many situations, users try to trigger conversions based on this pop-up window, which is actually another page loading inside of this. And that can be one possible way of tracking Unbounce form submissions, but you don't collect information easily and dynamically about necessarily the variant or other things that the user entered into the form fields, and it doesn't scale as easily. It's also not as easy to monitor and ensure that it's working across all of your various pages. You can see the event UB form submitted was also pushed here. And so this would be the event name that you'd probably target to actually track individual conversions inside of GTM with a simple rule. Now, the listener has some other features as well. We have the ability to push the event after a redirect, and that can be helpful if you redirect users to a thank you page, which is not necessary for the tracking any longer. However, if you want to surface that information in the console or in the data layer after the redirect, you can do that here. Once this is enabled, it's important to note that the actual setting must be turned on a per event basis inside of event settings. Now, the most powerful feature of ListenLayer is the ability to write rules that push custom values into your data layer, which will help to add segmentation and insights and also scale your tracking framework. So dig into that feature if you're interested in that. You can also write rules to store information from the data layer in the user's browser, or you can hard code specific information based on those rules. And you can store those as cookies, local storage, and session storage. You can also turn on monitoring, which allows you to write rules to send notifications to yourself when certain data layer activity occurs or does not occur. And you can turn on reporting, which will allow you to easily see information inside ListenLayer, specifically about all of your data layer activity. So for example, if you want to track and understand form validations without necessarily pushing that into Google Analytics, then you can just leave all of that information directly inside of ListenLayer. Unbounce is a really cool tool that allows you to scale your forms and landing page testing. But oftentimes that can be hard to track, and that's why we built the Unbounce Forms Listener. We hope you can dig into this and find as much value as we do when we're running our Unbounce landing pages.